We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for buffalo. We call ourselves the buffalo eaters, the Witchandika. And so buffalo was who we are. It's in our DNA, and so it's my relative.
They provided our lodges, they provided our food, they provided the work implements we used. I mean, they were everything to the Blackfeet. But then after the demise of the bison, we were sort of a lost people for a number of generations where we just didn't have that connection to the bison anymore. And so we just had to learn to survive without the bison.
They were all over. I mean, think about it, 30 to 60 million bison. That was a lot of grazing and a lot of disturbance. They would move through, and then those areas would rest. They literally enhance the ecosystem with their grazing and their hoof action. They increase plant diversity. When you have more diversity in your plants, you have more diversity in your insects, and then you have more diversity in birds. And going up this whole chain, they create habitat for other species. That's why they're called a keystone species.
We revere this animal culturally, spiritually. We need to also have that reverence for this animal as wildlife and allow it to live as such.
Bison are native wildlife, and their numbers were severely reduced, almost to complete collapse and extinction of the species. And whereas they're not alone in that, in the story of wildlife in North America, they are alone in being left out of the major wildlife restoration efforts of the 20th century.
Of all North American wildlife, there's arguably not another species that occupies the significant space in the intersection of ecological function and human relationship as American buffalo.
The buffalo should be a wildlife restoration effort the same way that we do with all of the other wildlife species. Why is this one any different? Especially since it's a keystone species. And so, if, all the federal agencies have trust responsibility to the tribes by treaty, but very few have lived up to that trust responsibility, and we don't have very many good examples of what that looks like. There's no reason why we can't have buffalo. And I think that we're much stronger and can achieve more if we're in alignment and think differently and much more holistically about how we restore land, how we want to see our public lands managed.
And I think there's a role for the federal government and for other state and NGOs and other partners to work with tribes to bring bison back to areas where they can be restored.
Given the significance of buffalo as a cultural resource and as quite literally as relative to many Great Plains tribes, it was only right that we took a co-production approach to developing this shared stewardship strategy. So we decided up front to invite tribes to nominate co-authors, to work with a core team of federal agency co-authors, and to come together to build this strategy as a team right from the start. And so this group of federal and tribal professionals has come together to craft a new vision to realize these lofty goals of bringing buffalo back, not just to a secure place from a genetic standpoint, but to a functionally significant role, both ecologically for American grasslands and culturally for Indigenous and American people.
So we're actually embarking on a historic moment where the federal Department of Interior agencies are fulfilling some of our trust responsibilities in an ecocultural restoration effort. And this strategy document is more of an overarching guidance for the agencies to work together and productively with the tribes.
And so in that approach, we have 8 tribal co-authors working with 5 federal co-authors, joined by our 14th co-author, which is buffalo herself. And we have had a hide and a skull present in the room with us at each of our meetings. We've taken time to ask ourselves what we think the buffalo would want us to be working on, focus on, what the buffalo's reaction would be to some of the things we're identifying as key directions for us to take.
So ecocultural restoration is really bringing back this animal for its importance to the people, but also for its importance to the land and the plants and animals that rely on that.
We have plenty of examples where we've had great conservation successes in bringing wildlife back from the brink, but there are very few examples of working toward a conservation objective that is inherently about human relationship and history and trauma and an invitation to be part of healing and an invitation to be part of reconciliation. It's deeper than science. In this particular case, we are absolutely facing up front and center to the history between the federal government, market hunters, indigenous people, and buffalo in this country. And it's a brutal history. It's a history of genocide, consumption, and overexploitation.
Being approached by government officials and asked to sit and discuss these things has been, to me, it's huge. It's major, and I'm sure a majority of Native Americans across the country would agree. Talking to a government official can be intimidating, and here here's not the case. I haven't felt like that one time.
And I've never experienced a project like this. I've never had the opportunity to truly, intentionally collaborate with federal partners in a way where we can understand each other, and there's this desire to meet where that understanding barrier has always been.
When it comes to tribes' point of view, it's really a big deal because so far, we've never really been listened to, and we've never had that strategic idea of how we are going to carry out this mission of getting buffalo back to the people.
And now I'm in a position where I can help restore the bison back to the landscape on Blackfeet and hopefully elsewhere across the West where there's land to do so, and tribes and nonprofits and government agencies that are willing to do the work.
For tribes to increase buffalo herds on their landscapes would allow for more food sovereignty efforts, more tribally led efforts to, just restore that food source that would be available to their tribal members across their tribal lands.
That's really what we're trying to do, is get more bison back on the landscape for tribal members and non-tribal members to enjoy and see, and to have buffalo meat on the school table for our school menu for our kids, as well as our nursing home, having that animal there and present, not just for a food sovereignty side of it, but the cultural significance that comes for the Oneida people.
I think the shared stewardship approach is important, and it's the right one. There's something different about the buffalo story and the richness of the connection to human culture that absolutely requires that we put people and culture and relationships front and center in order to facilitate the restoration of buffalo in a really meaningful way. And at the same time, creating and forming a new approach to what conservation can be.
That's the most important part of this entire project, is the opportunity to really showcase how tribal partners and federal partners can truly work together for a project that can have lasting impact.
I think if we keep an open heart and an open mind to what it can be, that we'll be able to move forward together.
And so as we build this shared stewardship strategy, the more that we can continue to work together, the more we're going to be able to achieve for buffalo, for tribal communities, and for the American people.